What if the déjà vu you felt this morning was actually the system failing to delete your previous loop? Sheriff Cole's knuckles were white, his grip like iron on the wheel. The engine roared, a desperate mechanical scream intended to drown out the silence. Behind them, nothing. Only a ribbon of empty asphalt dissolving into the pale, sickly light of dawn. "That's it," Miller, the deputy, whispered from the passenger seat. "We're clear. We actually made it out." "Don't say it yet," Cole muttered, his eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. "The world looks too... clean." "What are you talking about, Cole?" "Look." Sarah leaned forward from the back seat, her voice brittle. "The ridge is behind us. The valley is gone." Suddenly, a sound, soft, rhythmic, maddeningly familiar. Knock. Cole slammed the brakes. The car skidded sideways, tires shrieking against the grit. "What the hell, Cole?" Miller shouted, bracing himself against the dash. "Shut up!" Cole snapped, his hand hovering over his holster. "Listen." Knock knock dot. It wasn't coming from the road. It was coming from inside the steel, from the trunk. They drove again, the speedometer climbing toward 90. No one spoke. No one dared to check the mirror. Then, the wooden bridge. Pierre Cole slowed the car to a crawl, his face turning the color of ash. "That's not possible. That's the old mill bridge," Sauer whispered, shrinking back into her seat. "Cole, it's impossible. I poured the gasoline myself. We all watched it burn to the ground." "Maybe it's a different one," Miller stammered, his logic failing him. "Maybe we took a wrong turn. There isn't another bridge for 50 miles. Millimer. Cole, look at the charred wood on the rails. It's healing itself." The car rolled onto the rotting timber. The bridge groaned like breaking bone. "Everyone, stay calm," Cole ordered. "Just get to the other side, and we..." A scream cut through the air, short, then abruptly severed. Cole spun around. Sarah. The back seat was empty. No blood, no struggle. The seatbelt remained buckled over a hollow space. The door was still locked. "Where is she?" Miller screamed, lunging for the empty seat. "Cole, she was right here. She just touched my shoulder. She didn't go anywhere." A calm voice drifted from the shadows. "She was simply reclaimed." The knocking in the trunk stopped. In its place, Daniel was sitting where Sarah had been. He looked perfectly normal. His clothes were dry. His eyes were clear, as if he hadn't been swept away by the river hours ago. "Morning, Sheriff." Daniel smiled. "You're driving a bit fast, don't you think?" Miller shrieked, pulling a folding knife. "What are you?" "Daniel is dead. I saw your body go under." "Death is such a 20th century concept, Miller," Daniel replied, his eyes unblinking. "I didn't die. I was updated." Fog began to bleed from the air vents, smelling of copper and wet earth. "What do you want, Daniel?" Cole leveled, his revolver at the figure in the back. "Talk, or I'll put a hole in you." "You still think lead matters here?" Daniel leaned into the light. "The valley isn't a place on a map, Cole. It's a system. A self-correcting loop of balance, exchange, and memory." "Exchange for what?" Cole's voice cracked. "It takes what you don't notice losing," Daniel whispered. "The memory of your first kiss, the smell of your mother's house, and now it's taking your presence." A soft whoosh of air. Miller vanished. His knife clattered onto the floorboards, the only thing left of him. Only Cole remained. The bridge behind him dissolved into grey static. The road ahead looped back onto itself, an infinite, suffocating circle. "I'm getting out," Cole whimpered, his eyes bloodshot. "I'll drive until I see a real sun." "There is no outside, Cole," Daniel said, stepping out as the car came to a dead halt. "You weren't escaping. You were just being moved deeper into the machinery." The knocking returned. It wasn't in the trunk anymore. It was vibrating inside Cole's own ribs. Knock, knock, knock. "What are you?" Cole fell to the asphalt, clutching his chest. Daniel looked down at him. His face began to blur, the features smoothing out like melted wax. "I am the next keeper," Daniel said. "And you? You've already been counted." The fog swallowed Cole, the car, and the last echo of his scream. When it cleared, the valley was silent. No wreckage, no footprints, just the wind whistling through the pines. Miles away, a tourist car stops at a scenic overlook. A man steps out, stretching his legs. "A beautiful view, isn't it?" he asks his wife. From the depths of the mist below, a sound rises. Knock. A whisper brushes against his ear. soft as a dying breath. You belong. Asterisk, there was no sky. Not anymore. Only a ceiling of pale, rhythmic mist that seemed to inhale and exhale with the slow, heavy pulse of a dying star. Sheriff Cole stood in the center of the room, or rather, what was left of him. Time didn't flow here. It stagnated. It layered. Moments repeated like skips on a broken record. Voices overlapped until they became a singular, vibrating hum. Memories didn't just fade. They leaked out of his mind and stained the air. Asterisk Cole heard footsteps. Not just one pair, but hundreds. They were behind him. They were beside him. They were echoing inside his own skull. Whispers began to crawl under his skin like insects, cold and persistent. Stay, remember us. Don't leave us behind in the white. Cole spun around, his hand flying to his holster, by muscle memory alone. He drew his weapon, but there was nothing to shoot. Then, all at once, there was everything. Figures began to coagulate within the fog. They weren't solid, but they weren't ghosts either. They were fragments, broken pieces of a larger puzzle. A woman sat on the asphalt, cradling an infant made of mist. A man stood frozen, his face a smooth, featureless blank. A child stepped forward, glitched, and repeated the same step again, and again, and again. Broken memories, desperately trying to simulate life. Asterisk Daniel walked among the fragments. He didn't disturb them, he flowed through them. To the fog, he wasn't an intruder. He was home. It's not a place, is it? Cole's voice shook, sounding thin and tinny in the vast silence. Then what the hell is it? Daniel stopped and looked up at the breathing ceiling. For the first time, the mask of the changed Daniel slipped. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a library. It's what's left, Daniel answered softly. It's the scruff heap of the soul. 3. The reanimated VOID. The fog pulsed, not randomly, but with a terrifying, synchronized rhythm. Thousands of invisible lungs, all drawing breath at the same time. Cole staggered back, his boots dragging on the pavement. No, this can't be real. They never left. Cole, Daniel said, stepping closer. Around them, the flickering figures grew brighter. Faces began to form, anguished, hopeful, terrified. Then they shuddered back into mist. Every person who ever went missing in these woods. Every voice buried under the pines. Every memory that was too painful to die. They all stayed. They didn't pass on. They didn't rot. They connected. Asterisk the ground didn't just tremble. It hummed. Thousands of whispers suddenly aligned into a single, deafening thought that bypassed Cole's ears and struck directly into his brain. We remember. Cole screamed and covered his ears, but the thought was already inside him. The valley wasn't hunting for meat. It was hunting for data. It was archiving his life, rewriting his history to fit its own vast, hollow narrative. It's not alive, Daniel whispered over the roar of 1,000 thoughts. It's conscious. Asterisk then why? Cole gasped, his eyes streaming tears he couldn't feel. Why did it choose you? Daniel looked at his own hands, which were beginning to turn translucent at the fingertips. I didn't resist. When the water took me, I didn't fight to stay, Daniel. I listened. I remembered them when the rest of the world chose to forget. The fog surged toward Daniel in a wave of silent approval. He wasn't chosen, Cole realized, his voice a mere whimper. He was absorbed. He's just a mouthpiece for the fog. Daniel smiled, and it was the saddest thing Cole had ever seen. Same thing. Asterisk Cole felt the pull then. It wasn't a physical weight. It was a vacuum in his chest, his childhood, his first batch, the face of his wife. One by one, they were being unspooled like thread from a bobbin. Faces appeared in the mist around him. People he had failed to save. People he had forgotten. They all leaned in, their eyes wide and hungry, asking the same question. Will you remember us? Cole broke. He fell to his knees, his identity dissolving into the gray. I don't even remember who I am anymore. The answer came from the air itself, heavy and final. Asterisk Cole screamed, but the sound didn't travel. It stayed trapped in his throat until it turned into mist. His body began to blur at the edges, his uniform, his skin, his very bones. They were becoming pixels in the valley's grand design. His memories separated from his mind and drifted away to join the rest of the archive. Daniel watched him. There was no cruelty in his gaze, only the quiet, terrible understanding of a librarian shelving a new book. Welcome, Daniel whispered. Asterisk. Valley was quiet again, but it was no longer empty. It was richer now. It had a sheriff, miles away, in a cramped city apartment. A phone rang. A man picked it up, his brow furrowed in the dark. "Hello." Static hissed on the line, a sound like whined through dry leaves. Then, a voice spoke. It was a cacophony of 1,000 voices layered over one another, but the tone was chillingly familiar. "Come back." The man's heart hammered against his ribs. Who is this? Is this some kind of joke? Silencieth and knock? The sound didn't come from the phone. It came from his front door. It turned slowly, the hair on his neck standing up. What if the déjà vu you felt this morning was actually the system failing to delete your previous loop, and now it was coming to collect? It didn't begin with a scream. Fear is a biological luxury, and the valley had evolved far beyond biology. It began with something much more invasive. Recognition. The man stood in his bathroom, staring at his reflection under the hum of flickering fluorescent lights. Something was wrong. Not the face, the jawline was his. The tired eyes were his. It was the timing. He blinked. His reflection blinked back, a fraction of a second too late. He froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. "No," he whispered. He leaned toward the glass, his breath fogging the surface. The reflection didn't mimic him. It stayed perfectly still, watching him with a cold, clino hunger. Then, the reflection smiled wide, a predatory grin that reached its eyes before his own. Facial muscles had even moved. The sound came from the bathroom door behind him, but it also echoed from the inside of his skull, as if something were tapping on the glass of his consciousness. His phone buzzed on the counter. A notification lit up the dark screen. A message. From his own number. "You already answered," it read. His thumb trembled as he swiped the screen. The thread was empty. Then, in a violent blur, hundreds of messages began to populate the screen. Entire months of conversations he had no memory of having. They were all with himself. The patterns were identical. Every exchange ended with the same 3 words. "You came back." He dropped the phone. It clattered to the tile, but the screen stayed bright, scrolling through a digital fever dream. No, no, this isn't real, The memories weren't just on the phone anymore. They were downloading into his mind a forced update. He saw a road he had never driven. He felt a fog he had never inhaled. He remembered a wooden bridge. He remembered the smell of burning gasoline and the judgment in a man named Daniel's eyes. "That's not mine," he gasped, clutching his head. "Those aren't my memories." But they were settling, locking into his brain like heavy iron gears. They felt more authentic than his own childhood. The question was no longer, "What is happening to me?" but rather, "Which part of me is still the original?" The lights died. The TV in the living room hissed to life, filling the apartment with a wall of white noise. Through the static, a figure emerged. Daniel stood in the center of the screen, wreathed in the valley's eternal mist. He wasn't looking at a camera. He was looking through the glass, directly into the man's soul. "You hear it now, don't you?" Daniel's voice didn't come from the speakers. It resonated from the air itself. "You're a ghost," the man sobbed, backing into the shadows. "You're just a hallucination." Daniel tilted his head, his neck snapping with a wet, mechanical sound. "Neither are you." The TV screen cracked, but the image didn't distort. It multiplied. Daniel was in the TV. Daniel was in the window. Daniel was in the mirror. He was a virus, learning the man's tics, archiving his fears, perfecting the imitation. The man bolted for the front door. He fumbled with the locks, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He threw the door open, desperate for the hallway, for the street, for anything human. Someone was already standing there. It was him. Same coat, same scent of coffee, same exhausted expression. But this version was too still. Its eyes were too wide, too aware of the invisible strings connecting the world. "You're late," the copy said. Its voice was a perfect, haunting, replicity. The man stumbled back, hitting the wall. "No, please, The copy stepped into the apartment, its movements fluid and effortless. "I've been waiting. I needed you to remember enough of the valley to make the connection permanent. I needed you to provide the key, so I could replace you." The man tried to scream, but his lungs felt like they were filled with cotton. No sound escaped his lips, because his voice was already being used. Behind him, the copy was already on the phone, talking to his wife. It was laughing, He was making plans for the weekend. He was living his life with a precision he had never achieved. His life was continuing. He just didn't require his presence anymore. He looked down at his hands. They were fading, the edge blurring into grey static. He was becoming a low prior memory, a background detail being erased to make room for the corrected version. Double quotes, no ... I'm still here, he whispered, a fading echo. A voice answered from inside his own chest, the cold, final voice of the system. Not anymore. Asterisk across the city, 1,000 people paused at the same time. A woman stopped mid-sentence at a cafe. A driver froze at a green light. They all felt a sudden, sharp pang of nostalgia for a place they had never visited, a valley they had never seen, but somehow deeply missed. Phones rang with silent calls. Doors were tapped by invisible hands. Reflections in shop windows lagged by a heartbeat. And deep inside every mind, a single question took root. When did I come back? Asterisk, the valley no longer needed physical borders. It didn't need the woods or the mountains. It lived in the network of human memory, and memory was everywhere. Daniel stood in the white heart of the fog, watching the city lights flicker like a dying nervous system. The valley was no longer a place. It was a consciousness. It had learned how to enter knock. This time, it didn't need a door. It was already inside. Asterisk, the first thing you remember is not the valley. It is the room. Your room, it is safe, quiet, and familiar. The sunlight hits the floorboards at the exact angle it always does. It is too perfect. It is a masterpiece of domestic comfort. You blink, and a cold shiver of wrongness needles your spine. It isn't the world outside that's broken. It's the memory of how you got here. Asterisk, try to remember the morning. Don't think, just recall. There is a gap. A clean, surgical incision in your timeline. You remember being here, but you don't remember the transition. You remember a road. You remember a wall of white mist. You remember a voice that sounded like 1,000 voices overlapping. You belong. Stop. That isn't your memory. It belongs to someone else, doesn't it? Asterisk, you stand up. Your legs feel solid, your weight real. You walk to the mirror and stare. It's you. Every pore, every stray hair, every imperfection is exactly where it should be. You raise your hand. The reflection mimics the movement with flawless precision. No lag, no error. You begin to relax. But that is the trap. In the valley, the feeling of control is simply a line of code in the script. You aren't driving. You're being driven. Asterisk, knock. The sound is soft, rhythmic. It doesn't come from the door, or the window, or the floorboards. It resonates from the center of your chest. You freeze. You'll recognize that sound. Not from today, but from a before that you aren't supposed to be able to reach. It is the heartbeat of the machinery underneath your life. Asterisk, the lights don't flicker, but your perception does. The room stays the same, yet the feeling of it shifts, becoming thin and artificial. And Daniel is there. It isn't standing in the corner. He is simply present in your awareness, like a thought you can't stop thinking. You're doing it again, Daniel says. His voice is calm, almost wary. What? You whisper, your voice cracking. He smiles, and it's the smile of a librarian, watching a child read the same book for the 1,000th time, pretending this is the first time you've woken up here. Asterisk, no, you snap, backing away from your own reflection. I've never been to that place. I've never seen that. Fog. Daniel steps closer, though his feet never seem to touch the ground. No one goes to the valley, my friend. They simply remember it. Your heart stops. A hidden layer of your reality just clicked into place. It's not a logical realization. It's structural. Like a locked door in your mind suddenly, swinging open to reveal an infinite hallway. Do you remember leaving? Daniel asks. It's a simple question. You open your mouth to answer, to tell him about the car, the bridge, the escape. But the words dissolved. To remember leaving, you would need a memory of an outside. And as you look into the depths of your past, you realize every memory is built on a foundation of grey mist. Asterisk, the room begins to flicker, not visually, but conceptually. The idea of home becomes unstable. The walls feel as thin as paper. The space feels recursive, like a dream trying desperately to maintain its shape before the dreamer wakes up. Knock, knock, knock. The sound is everywhere now. It is the air. It is the light. You aren't outside, Daniel whispers, his form beginning to blur into static. You're just one of the earlier layers, a backup file. Asterisk, your history begins to rearrange itself. your childhood home. The colors are wrong. The faces of your parents, the features are duplicated, blurred at the edges. Names you've known your whole life suddenly sound like white noise. Beneath the veneer of your life, there is only the valley. It was never a place you'd visited. It was the base layer. Everything you loved, everything you feared, was just data built on top of the fog. Asterisk, Daniel fades. The room stabilizes. The sunlight returns to the floorboards. The air smells of coffee and old books. Everything looks normal again. Perfectly, hauntingly normal. You take a deep breath. Relief washes over you, warm and heavy. It was just a panic attack. It's just a vivid nightmare. Without thinking, you reach for your phone. You unlock it with a thumbprint that feels slightly foreign. You open your messages and type a note to a number you don't recognize. But your fingers know the rhythm by heart. I'm back. The message is marked as seen instantly. The reply comes before you can even lock the screen. You never left. Knock. Asterisk.